Hey everyone, this is Akash from DronaHQ, and today I'm going to show you how to connect your Firebase database to DronaHQ using REST APIs. So currently we don't have a direct support, which by the way we're planning very soon. But this video is also useful for in general if you want to connect any Google service to your DronaHQ account. You can find this video useful on how to get the client ID and how to set up Oauth configurations and connect it to DronaHQ to make everything work like a charm. So yeah, let's get started. So I have my DronaHQ console open over here. We need to head over to the connectors section, of course, to add a connector. And here you can see a list of all my connectors already present. So you have to go to add a connector on the top right here and choose the REST API option since we don't have a direct connection support for it. So you need to enter your category name, category description, standard details. I already have my connector configured, so I'll just edit that to make it easier for all of us, and I can show you all the details we need to add. So yeah, category name, just enter whatever you want, Firebase connector, give a appropriate description so that other users can understand what's it about. You can choose an icon for it. So something to represent Firebase, you can choose a Firebase icon from your system and whatnot. Click continue once that's done. Now you have to choose an authentication scheme. Google has a lot of authentication schemes, but those are depreciated, and the current one which we use is Oauth version 2 v2. So make sure to click that. Based on what you're connecting, it might differ, but for now, usually with Google services and in the case of Firebase, go ahead with Oauth v2 and click continue. And you're almost halfway there. We just have to configure these API fields and then you're good to go. So the first step is to add authentication fields. This is not required in our case because Oauth v2 handles all of it. So in case you're using other schemes, you might have to add some keys here. But for now, we can skip this, and it even says in the description you can skip this step if it's Oauth v2. So we're going to skip it. Next is the Oauth redirect URL, which we have to copy in our app so that it knows where to redirect and what's going on. Right. So for this, we need to head over to Google Cloud Developers Console. So you can just maybe simply open a new tab, search Google Cloud Developers and click on the first link. It will boot up the Cloud Console. So once that's GCP or Google Cloud Platform has booted up, go to the project, ensure you've chosen the project you want. You can go to all and choose the project which you are setting it up for, and it will open it up. So click on the menu on the top left over here and go to API and services and click on credentials. So we need to configure two things. One is the credential and set up a web client, and another is the Auth Consent screen. So both these we need to set up, and then we can connect the details, whatever is mentioned from DronaHQ, to the console over here. So let's first set up our Auth Consent screen. So this is basically when you're asking for consent, you're setting up the screen and how the screen should look. You can read the FAQs over here to understand what's all it about. So I've already set up an Auth client. Let's go to edit tab to see what fields are required. So you need an app name. So I've named it DronaHQ web client. You can name it whatever you want. Add a user support email. So if anyone has to contact you about questions, then they can contact at this particular email. So here on the right hand side, you can see how this information will look. Your app name, whatever you enter, will come here. If you set up an app logo, it will come here. And when the access is being requested, the screen will pop up to the user, and if they allow it, then the connection will be successful. So fill in the app domain, enter your app privacy policy link. Although it's optional, it's advised to add it. I am not adding it since it's just for test purposes, demonstration purposes. This is an important step. In the authorized domain, make sure you add dronahq.com over here so that DronaHQ can successfully connect to your Firebase database. And developer contact information, just enter the developer's email address and click on save and continue. So next is the scopes which are required for your app. So if you go to the Firebase docs, you will usually find all such information. So here, this is my Firebase doc. I'll also link it in the description. You can just simply do a Google search and get this Firebase doc. If you go down, they'll talk about what scopes are required. We need these 2 scopes, so we have to ensure these 2 scopes are added. So I go back to my GCP or Google Cloud Console. I go to add or remove scopes and just copy both of those text from here and paste it on separate lines in the manually add scopes, or you can of course search it over in the table and add it, and click on update. It will update the scopes required. So we need 2 scopes, the userinfo.email and the Firebase to access all your Firebase data and settings. So once you've added your scopes, you can save and continue, and then you'll need to add test users. So just add the users. Currently we're launching it as a testing app. We have not yet verified it. So add the users who you want to be able to access this app. Once you publish it, this won't be a problem. And that's it. You can just view your summary, and if you're happy with everything, just click on back to dashboard. So that's how you set up the Oauth Consent screen. And now let's go to the credentials and set up a web client or an Oauth 2 client ID. So for this, you need to click on this create credentials option here and click on create a new Oauth client ID. So I've already created one. I'll just click on mine and show you what details are required. So you'll get the same screen if you create a new one. So enter a name for your client ID, the name whatever is required. In the authorized JavaScript origin, ensure you have this particular URI added, studio.dronahq.com, so that it can access it correctly. And finally, if you remember back in our studio, we saw this OAuth redirect URL which you have to copy it in our app. So click this copy button or just copy this text, and this is where we're supposed to paste it. In the authorized redirect URIs, you're supposed to paste that here, ensure that is added, and click on save. So that's it. We have our client ID also added, and we have that set up. We're almost done. Let's go and see what other fields they require. So if I go back to my studio tab, enter your application credentials. So you need a client ID and a client secret here. So we just created an Oauth client, and you can click on that Oauth client we created, and you'll get a client ID and a client secret visible here. So just copy these 2 fields and paste it over there in the studio fields. Once this is done, we need an Oauth version 2 endpoint configuration. We need an authorization URL. So which URL to access to get the authorization. Again, if you just Google authorization URL, you can visit their docs, and this is the doc I have already opened up. It's all about setting up Oauth v2. So here you'll find the particular URL you're looking for. If you scroll down a little bit, they would have mentioned it somewhere. Anyway, you can read through this and find out the URLs, but I already have it loaded up. I'll link it in the description too. So just enter this URL for the authorization URL, and the scopes, the 2 scopes which we had seen in the Firebase doc, just copy paste them back in DronaHQ too, so that it limits the scope to only these and don't get unnecessary access. So ensure it's space separated as it's mentioned in the instructions. And for your access token, you need this URL, which again, if you read through the docs, you can find out and paste it here. And for your refresh token, also put the same URL so that it can refresh, and if there's an error, it will automatically refresh, and ensure this option is enabled. So that's pretty much it. We're done. If you click continue, we'll reach the testing scheme, and if you click the test button over here, it will show up this ID. Choose the user you've added in the testing screen and click on continue. So you can see that this is the consent screen which we just set up in the previous step. Just click continue and it will show a success, and yes, that's pretty much it. We have successfully connected our Firebase account to DronaHQ. Now the next process is adding your queries. So to retrieve the data, let's quickly go and see how my data looks like. So this is my main real-time database through which I've just connected it. I have a field called database where I have all my rows and values inside it. So it has some standard data of some people, their phone numbers, city and email addresses. It has about 100 rows. So I need to add a query. Let's say I want to add a query to read all of this data and use it in my app, in my Studio app. So I need to head back here. I need to click on find the connector I just added. Ensure you can add a API or a query. Sorry, it's API in this case. So here you enter the URL you want, choose the method, whether it's a get, post, and give a name for it. URL you will need, click here, double click on the screen from the Firebase console and just copy it and paste it back over here and press get and give an appropriate name for it. I have already set up this URL, so I'll just go here, the same URL I've pasted. Ensure a .json is added because Google Fire Console stores everything in JSON formats. So when you fetch it in a .json format so that it's readable by DronaHQ. And if I just click test and save, we can see that we're getting the response from our Firebase database. Ensure the scan bind response is yes, so that you'll know for sure that's in a readable format which DronaHQ can understand. And yes, that's pretty much it. We have added a query. Let's quickly jump into the app and see how to use it. I'm just going to drag and drop a table grid control. And I need to click on this bind data section over here, click on connectors and add my Firebase connector. Fetch data is the API I want to use, correct? And connector name, just write any name, suitable name. So we're retrieving data, so I'm just going to write retrieve data and test and finish. Awesome, it's been added successfully. I can now select the API keys I want to use or the key I want to display on my table grid. So city, email, name, phone, let's just display everything, why not? You can add filters and sorting optionally if you want to display only of particular city maybe. And just save it. You can see here 100 records have been found, so it's found all our data successfully. But still, let's preview it to make sure. If I click on preview, awesome, you can see all the details have been fetched and everything works fine. So that's it, you got it up and running, and that's pretty much all there is to it. So using REST APIs, you can set up honestly any application which supports REST APIs. So it's really flexible, and I hope you learned something out of this video and liked it. And well, thank you, and I'll catch you next time.